Hi, I'm Scarlett Wilson. I'm an account manager at RedCentric. I'm here with Paul McKenna and Darren Adcock. Guys, could you give me some examples of what customers have done when their VMware licenses have expired?
Yeah, sure. I'll step in first. I've got an example of a customer who actually were able to take the opportunity to move to a managed private cloud solution with a cloud provider. Situation was that their hardware was kind of getting close to the end of its natural life. So they're already thinking about what to do. They looked at their options and decided that actually the private cloud option was going to be the quickest and easiest for them to do. And they wanted to move at speed in this case because the actual impending expiry of their license was close. So they really needed an option that was quick and easy to execute so they could actually get onto that managed private cloud solution before having to renew their actual Broadcom licenses. And they're able to do that by taking that route.
Yeah, I'll probably give you an example from a customer in the retail sector that we were working with that actually took a slightly different approach because they still had a lot of hardware that was still had lots of life left in it. The issue they faced with was though, because under the old model, where it was more around the VRAM usage, they actually had more servers than they needed under the new core model. So what we've done with that customer is work with them to consolidate their workloads onto a smaller server footprint that meant they could reduce their VMware bill under the new core model. And what we're now doing with that customer is working with them over the lifetime of their existing hardware to move them into our private cloud solution. But because we were able to move them onto this smaller consolidated estate, we have minimized their VMware costs and in effect bought them a period of time when they can now look at their migration onto the private cloud solution.
And probably the last one to touch on is customers that have actually gone to public cloud. We have customers that are already considering this and actually thinking about their options were. What they've essentially done is they've used the licensing change as a catalyst to actually accelerate that plan. A good example of one is where they kind of categorized their applications into kind of complexity, so kind of low, medium, high, in an attempt to say, okay, how quickly can we move to try and minimize my exposure if I did have to actually extend into or relicense when my old license agreements ended. So what they're able to do by starting on the low ones, they start with that low-hanging fruit, the applications that are either non-business critical or maybe didn't need much modification to actually work on public cloud. Get that done, right? As soon as they're able to do that, they've then been able to redeploy the people that have dealt with the simple stuff to then actually support the other team that had already started work on the kind of medium and high risk stuff. So basically they're able to kind of say deep planning that was required for the complex stuff, start that early, get the quick wins on the low priority stuff, and then bring the two teams together at the end to complete the actual exercise. Of course, the outcome of that is they're now able to get onto public cloud. They're now in a position to actually deploy more public cloud services because they're there, it's more simple to do it. And one of the key parts of the deployment was the initial landing zone that they deployed. Now a landing zone is kind of like you can think it's like almost like a central point of policy control. So by having a landing zone in there, you put guardrails around it. So essentially things like, well actually, because of the nature of my company, I only want to deploy Azure resources, for example, in the UK. Or there's certain resources like budgetary constraints. I will allow my people to spend up to a certain amount of money. So essentially you put that control in early. And by doing that as part of the initial migration, essentially that baseline is there for them as they start to actually consume more AWS Azure services, whatever it is they're using. They're doing it in a controlled fashion. So they get away from these problems where cost starts to spiral out of control really quickly because those things haven't been done. And obviously you also get the benefit of security because it's built in from the very start. So really important that first step was taken.
If your VMware licenses are due to expire, get in touch and we can have a discussion.